Hey, do you prefer to find the joy in life, or do you just want some help with that? If so, you're in the right place. So come on in and join the Joy Bunny clan. This is the My Slice of Life podcast. How well has your garden done this year? Have you got superb strawberries, disappearing dahlias, or positively perfect peas? Welcome to the My Slice of Life podcast, where this week I'm taking some time to review the gardening year so far. This is a good time to take stock, look at the successes and work out the failures. Can you believe this season, which is called Let's Get Gardening, is nearing its end? I can hardly believe it myself, if I'm honest. It's flying by. But before we crack on any further, please remember to give this episode a like, follow the podcast, because you never know what the next season will be. I don't always know. If you look at past seasons, you will see how varied this podcast really is. And as sharing is caring, tell folk about the podcast, get them listening and encourage more and more people to become a member of our little Joy Bunny clan. And if you can't get enough of gardening and want to keep up to date with what I'm doing in the garden and the allotment, subscribe to my YouTube channel and the blog. The links are in the description, because that's where I'll be continuing to share my gardening journey as I go on through the rest of the year. That's as well as sticking with the podcast, by the way, because I want you with me. I like talking to you and sharing what I find out every week, so I hope you all decide to stick around and stay with me. Now, let's get all reflective about our gardens for a wee while, shall we? It is a good idea to take a little time out and do a sort of review of your garden, but do you ever write it down? Do you ever keep a gardening journal? I have one and I'm really good with it at the beginning of the year. I write down everything I've done, through the winter, then the first seeds I sow, how well they germinate, and I try to keep it going. I bet you can already tell where this is heading, can't you? I put a diagram in it of the allotment to show where I planted what was ready at that time, and it's already out of date. I've already had things out, moved things around, things have died, I've had to replant, so it's already out of date. Now, I won't go through absolutely everything that I'm growing this year, but I'll point out the main good, bad and the ugly to give you an overall picture of what's been happening here. I would also like to point out that I have a very short growing season here, and sometimes a slightly unrealistic view of what will be able to grow in these conditions. I know I've said previously, find out what works well in your area and, things like that. But I'm stubborn as a mule. Yes, I'll admit it. So I will try things just because I like them, or I'm interested just to find out what happens. I will try it. Having said that, I've been pretty tame this year in the types of things I want to grow, just a little deluded in how much space I actually have. Now, the allotment is 20 metres by 10 metres, and I have a small garden here at the house. The front garden is mainly flowers with some bushes and the like, but I have put in a rhubarb plant. There's some strawberries and herbs here and there, but it's very, very small. If you listened to episode 6 of this season, which was all about bringing the fun back into gardening, you will know I planned to put a fairy garden in at the front, and I am still working on it. I've been working away at it actually, and I'm really pleased with it so far. I've hit a few snags, but I am hoping by the time this goes out it will be finished, or very nearly finished. So keep an eye out on the blog and the YouTube channel to see how it turned out. I got the pond finished yesterday, so keep an eye out for that. I'm really, my fingers are crossed, I'm telling you, I want it to look so good. I also want to point out that no matter where you are listening to this, I think it's fair to say this has not been an easy gardening year so far for anyone. So if you are new to gardening, please don't be put off if you've encountered problems, because we all have. We've all been struggling in one way or another. So stick with your gardening. Don't give up. This has not been a good or typical year. Here in the UK, everyone is complaining about the snails and the slugs. They've increased in number, they're getting bigger, and the greedy blighters are eating absolutely everything they can. For this reason, I've been starting off as much as I can indoors, nearly everything in fact. I've also not planted out things like my brassicas until they've grown quite a bit. I was hoping the plants would be a bit tougher that way and then not so enticing to the snails, who love nothing more than sweet little seedlings. And for the most part, that strategy has worked out pretty well. They're not going for the bigger plants. They must just be too tough. Now, I have lost a couple of cabbages, but the other thing that I did sort of by accident, an accident which happens every year, but it's turning out to be pretty handy this year. I've oversown a few things. I thought I had way too many cabbages, for example, but what I'm discovering is you're better to have a few for backup. I've been growing them on in pots so that when I get to the allotment and I see one or two of them have been attacked or just completely eaten, I've got a decent sized plant to replace it with. That has worked brilliantly, and what has really helped me actually with my seed sowing and seedling growing this year is my pretty odd looking DIY polytunnel I built in the back garden. I really needed a space which I could use to grow my plants and protect them from the colder weather earlier in the season, and also so I can grow more summer crops like tomatoes and chilies, but I didn't have the money to buy a nice brand new polytunnel. So I made one. I put up a blog post about it, but if you want to actually see how I built it, there is a video on YouTube showing that. It's just over 4 minutes, so it's not a long watch, but it does show you what you can make out of total scrap. Now when you see it, you might notice it's a little slanted and not the prettiest thing, but I'll tell you what, it's working like a dream, and I have sown and grown a ton in there already, so that's definitely been a win this year. I did it on my own, and I'm not the best at building things at all, but it works, and I'm very happy with it. My husband and I, on the other hand, we are betting each other how long it will last, but that's another story, so we'll just move on, shall we? It's doing alright so far. We've had a lot of wind and rain and it's standing up, so fingers crossed again. I keep crossing my fingers for my gardening projects, but so far so good. Something which didn't go so well, however, was my cucumber plants. I put them in the polytunnel up at the allotment, and I noticed some little holes in the ground, so I was thinking mice or something similar, and do they eat cucumber? I didn't think so, but I put a wee cover over all of them, all 3 of them, and I thought they had all disappeared, gone. In fact, 2 of them have completely gone. I mean, they were not the healthiest looking things, so maybe it was just slugs, and I'm not too sure. It looked maybe snails and slugs. I can't find any, but that's what I'm going with. The seeds were also a little bit old, so for next year I will be getting new seeds. There is one of them left that was pretty much a stick, and I checked it yesterday and it's growing. It's just a little, but it is growing. But the tomato plants on the other side of that polytunnel, they're growing fine, so they're obviously stronger and not so enticing to whatever it was that ate the other cucumber plants. I'm on a mission now to get some new cucumber plants to replace them because I just don't have time to grow anymore at this point. I mean, this is going out on the 1st of July. Can you believe it's July already? And I was a bit annoyed too because I love homegrown cucumber, but there's not much I can do about it. They're gone. So I'll look after the one I have, see if I can get some replacements. And that's just how it goes with gardening. If I can't get replacement plants, I'll use the space for something else. I've got courgette plant which could go in, I've got chilies, I've got more tomatoes, so I'm not stuck. Something will be going in there very soon. Something else which has been pretty much a disaster this year is my garlic. For the last few years I've been struggling to get a decent sized bulb to grow. I had a whole patch not even show up. Again, that is on one of the YouTube videos. It's just horrendous. However, I did get a tip from someone online who said they grow theirs under a cover of some sort to protect them from the worst of the winter weather. So I'm going to try that this year. I plant them in October, November time, so all I can think is they rotted with the cold. So maybe this year with a bit of protection, they'll do better. So if you've had similar problems trying to get your garlic to grow, maybe that's a tip you can use too, grow them under cover. Some folk I've heard grow their garlic in their polytunnel for just this reason, which I hadn't thought of before, but I will be using a cover of some sort this year for definite. I had another total fail, which I wanted to share with you. Don't worry, it's not all total fails. There's some good stuff too. Over the past few years, I've struggled with slugs, again, eating my carrot seedlings, and I've been trying to think of a way to protect them. This year I saw a growing method which everyone was talking about, and it looked great, and it is great. But I made a fatal mistake. Okay, hear me out. You start by lining a plastic Tupperware box with your kitchen paper, which you dampen. Then you sprinkle your carrot seed on top. You put some cling film over the box to keep in the moisture. And after just a few days, doesn't take long, you'll start to see the little white roots appear. So I did all that and it worked great. The next part is you take egg trays, the square trays, you fill them with compost, and using tweezers, you pick up each seedling individually and put one in each cell of the egg tray. Let me tell you, that part took me hours. I am not even joking. I did that for hours. Once you've done that, then you spray them so they're nice and damp and they will grow on, which is when you lay them on the ground. Now the idea is the cardboard of the egg cartons keeps the slugs away. I have to say here, I got some of them to grow, but the mistake I made was I let them dry out. Anything you grow on cardboard dries out quicker, so I should have known better. They have to be watered pretty much every day, and even with all the rain we've had, we did have about 7 to 10 days earlier on in the year when it was quite warm and quite dry, and that's, of course, when I put them out, and I didn't keep up with the watering. However, oh yes, there is more to the story. Since most of them didn't work, and as the trays were already laying down, I filled them with the seed compost I'd left over and I re-sowed my carrots, and I'm really doing my best to keep them watered. And I checked them yesterday. They're doing great. They are doing great. Now, we've had a lot of rain, but I've also been practically drowning them every time I'm up at the allotment, and there are green shoots coming everywhere. So if you want to have your carrots minus the slugs, it's pretty good at keeping the weeds down. There's the odd one or two poking through, where the cardboard boxes are there's a wee gap in between them, which I tried not to have, but it's going to happen. So it is working. Keep the watering going. That is it. Time consuming at the start, but I'll see how the carrots turn out at the end. Now don't let my mistake put you off, because that was entirely my mistake, not the growing system's fault. And now for the good news. With the rain we've had recently, the peas are responding really well. I'm growing just a couple of different kinds. I've got snow peas and Kelvedon Wonder, and even though we've lost a few seedlings, I was blaming the snails. Yesterday we did a big clear out. I won't go into detail because it's just tidying up, but I found a little mouse, and I'm thinking maybe that's who's been eating some of the little seedlings, because they do like the seeds. Mice like your pea seeds, so maybe he's been in there helping himself. But on the whole, it looks like we'll do pretty well with the rest of the peas that are there. I'm growing the snow peas up wigwams this year, and they are looking gorgeous already. I'm really happy with them. There's loads of flowers coming on. The only thing is, because they can grow so tall and they get heavy, they're falling all over the place. So I'm going to have to go back up with the string and actually tie them onto the wigwam. I thought they would just hold on to the strings, but no, they need a little bit more encouragement because they are so big. The potatoes are flowering now too and looking very healthy. This is the time to be on blight patrol, so I am keeping a close eye on them. And actually we've had some of the early ones already. Not too many, but I took a handful the other day. It was just so good to be able to take produce home now and cook it for dinner. The variety for the earlies is Charlotte. I've been growing them now for a couple of years. Really impressed with them. They grow well. They taste great. I just love them. Love them. Nothing better at the start of the season than having your new potatoes, and they're just fabulous. So that's Charlotte. If you're looking for an early variety, try them. I really recommend them. The brassicas are doing brilliantly this year. Last year, total disaster. Again, on the YouTube channel, you will see a video called The Brassica Massacre, but not this year. All thanks to that cold, wet weather we've all been complaining about. But this is the thing, isn't it? Because we want to grow so many different varieties, we forget that the weather we get won't suit everything we want to grow. So the cabbages loved the cooler wet weather, but the more tender, warmth-loving plants, like my beans, have struggled to get a good start. It's a fine balance, it really is. So you're going to get good and bad. You just have to go with it and take it as it comes. Every year we have some things which do brilliantly and some things which are terrible. And I have to remind myself, it isn't all to do with me and what I've done. Sometimes it's just what happens. So remember that if you're having a lot of failures and a couple of successes, It's not always us. It could be the weather, it could be the seeds. It's just how it goes. I've been trying to sow spring onions this year and they've been terrible. I'm really annoyed because that's something I can normally grow very easily. So I think the seeds I'm using are a bit on the old side, if I'm honest. Again, something else I need to jot down for my plan for next year. And I know this is only July, but as a gardener, we're always assessing and planning. What do I want more of next year? What did I run out of this year? And so on. Keep planning. And if you have seen my latest video on YouTube, you will see my parsnip germination has been pretty good this year. I was weeding them the other day, so the video shows that. And also what they look like as seedlings. If you're new to gardening and you want to grow a lot of different things, especially things you sow directly into the soil, it can be really hard to tell what are the weeds and what are the plants you want to keep if you haven't actually seen them in the early stages of growth before. So in the video I point out the parsnips which I have, which they're at different stages of growth, even though they were all sown at the same time. And I also point out some weeds which can be mistaken for young parsnips. I would encourage you to nip along and have a look at that, because I'll tell you, that growing strip was so overgrown with weeds and the transformation by the end is very satisfying. Again, not a long video, in fact it's only a couple of minutes, but I think you'll enjoy it. I think it's worth seeing, something which is so overgrown and a lot of people that would put them off, but when you see it at the end, well worth it. And it didn't even take me that long. Even though it's parsnip and a bit fiddly, that strip didn't take me very long at all. A couple of other quick mentions I have. The pumpkins and squashes, pretty good germination. Again, using old seed. I'm just trying to use things up before I get new stock in. And they're not growing brilliantly, if I'm honest. I put out 2 pumpkins in the compost bin on the allotment, which is a great place to grow them. And they've both been eaten. They were Atlantic Giant last year. That's the one we used for a pumpkin competition. They have both disappeared. Luckily, again, I have replacements, not of Atlantic Giant, I only had a couple of them, but I do have some other pumpkins that I can put in, and I'll be putting covers over them. Again, like the gallon bottles with the bottom cut off, place it over for a cloche, just something to protect them. My leeks at the moment are nothing to write home about, but it's early days yet, and they're still in pots. Charles Dowding, if you know him, he puts his leeks in where his potatoes are grown, so I think I'm going to try that this year. I've got manure in there for the potatoes, so the leeks are going to love that soil. That will be once I get the earlies out, which I'm just starting to harvest now, like I said, so it won't be long before I can get all my leeks in there and hopefully get them growing to a decent size. Now, my onions and shallots this year have been a bit of a mixed bag. I grew the shallots from bulbs, and some of the onions from bulbs as well, and some from seed, and they're doing okay. I'll be harvesting the shallots this week, I think, as the stems are starting to go brown and fall over, which is the sign that they're not going to grow anymore. They're basically screaming, get me out of here. So yeah, I'm going to harvest them this week and get something in that space. This year with the onions looks to be pretty much the same as before. Some look good, others look a little small. But the one thing I do know about home-sown onions is that they are strong in flavour. So maybe I don't need such big onions anyway, as the shop bought ones. It's another big difference actually that I noticed between growing your own and buying from the shops. Shop bought onions don't make your eyes water as much as they used to, do they? And they don't taste that strong. You grow your own and you will notice a big difference. I'm doing quite a few tomatoes and peppers this year, which seem to be doing pretty good. There's a few flowers now starting to appear. I'm seeing some folk already picking tomatoes and chilies, but like I said, our growing season is a bit different here, but it does look like I'll be getting quite a good harvest from them in a little while. Not quite yet. Yeah, if you're already picking yours, yes, I am jealous. I'm not ready. They're just starting to flower. Courgettes are the same. They're out, but they're not flowering yet. And I've got 3 marrow plants to go out. I grew one before, and I got 1 marrow, which might sound pathetic, but it was pretty big, so I had to get quite creative to use it all up. 3 might be too many, but again, I'm expecting to lose at least 1 this year, so I've got backup, so I'm not going to worry about that. If you grow lettuce, you'll know they don't like heat. I grow most of mine in a sheltered spot at the back of the garden, actually in a big pot, and that is doing really well. I just pick off the outer leaves as and when we need them, and they just keep growing. I've also got a couple in the DIY polytunnel and a few seedlings to go out now in the allotment. I grow most of mine here at the house so that I can just nip out and pick them, but I am going to put some at the allotment. And I did something new this year with my lettuces, actually, just the other day, so this is good timing. I put up my vertical gardens just a couple of days ago, and I've got lettuce, nasturtiums and some chard in them. They're just 2 bags. They're nicely decorated. They've got holes in them for your plants to go in, and then you fill them up and hang them up on a fence. Haven't tried it before. I'm hoping the chard will grow nicely out the top. The flowers from the nasturtiums will grow down, and then we can pick lots of nice lettuce off it as well. In my head, it looks fantastic. We'll need to wait and see. I'll put some pictures up on the blog at a later date to show you how they turn out. Good or bad, I will show you. I'd like to share my failures as much as the successes, just to let you know it happens. But we've got to get over this. I'm not on Instagram, but I hear people put up these pictures on Instagram of everything looking absolutely perfect, and it's off-putting. Nothing is perfect. So if I have an absolute almighty failure, I'm going to share that. If I have a success, no matter how big, how small, I'm going to share that too, because that is the reality of what it's like to garden. The reality is also I talk with my hands, and if you hear pinging while I'm recording this, it's because I keep hitting things around the table. Nothing to do with growing, but there you go. One last thing I want to share with you, which has been a success, is my fruit. I'm talking about the bushes. Again, there's a bit of noise in the background. I don't know if I'm going to be able to continue with this recording at the moment because people are working in the house next door. I will do my best to finish this. Where was I? Yes, my fruit bushes. The red currants are unstoppable this year. The black currants are really doing well. We've had a lot of strawberries already, and there's loads more to come. I've got raspberries and brambles coming, so there's plenty of good stuff to come. The fruit bushes are doing great. Must be the rain. They must like the rain. And then we had a blast of hot weather. It's got cooler again, but we've still managing showers here and there. So they seem to be responding to all of that changing weather, but they're responding really well. And I think that's an important thing to remember. I mean, I've just shared a lot of things with you, which many would consider a failure, or at the very least, not very good. But like I said, there's loads of things which are growing well, and in gardening, it's hard to get everything right. I'm not sure you can, actually, but that's the challenge, isn't it? That's what keeps us going. Well, for me it is anyway. That and the lovely food we get. So what do I take away from this year? Well, one thing is I need to keep better notes about what I do and what works or doesn't work. I also need to make sure I'm not using seeds which are too old. I'm going to note down pretty soon what seeds I need for next year so that when the catalogues come, and they will, like an avalanche through that letterbox, I'm going to know what I need and I'll be looking for them instead of being distracted by all the pretty pictures and end up buying what I don't actually want. They look nice in the photographs and I end up buying these things, but no, I'm going to stick this year to my list. The work we did in the winter really does pay off. Indeed, the son and I were up there on freezing cold days, clearing the soil, getting manure in and so on. Not a ton of work, but it helped. It really did help get the soil ready for us this year. So all of those things I'm going to take away with me this year. And like I said, I'm not finished yet, so there will be more lessons for me to learn and put into practice for next year. And I want to leave you with this thought. Every harvest you get, no matter how small, is a win. Every berry, every pea pod, every cabbage, every potato, that small tomato you weren't too happy about, they're all wins. The more we grow ourselves, the less we need to buy. The happier our purses will be, the happier our guts will be, and the happier we will be. So take some time this week, reflect on your gardening year so far. What has worked well for you? What would you change? And what are you grateful for? And that, my gardening friends, brings us to the end of this week's episode, which is just as well because the workers next door are driving me nuts with their noise already. I hope it hasn't been too distracting. Join me next week for the final episode in this gardening season as I am bringing yet more ideas to help us all get and keep gardening. But until then, You take care of your wee self.